Dissociative disorders. So, dissociative disorders are a group of pathologies involving the fragmentation of the personality, in which some parts of the personality have become detached from other parts. So, there's a few different dissociative disorders, but they all have this basis to them, right? And that's why they're called dissociative disorders. So, the first one is dissociative amnesia. It's a psychological induced loss of memory for personal information like one's identity. So usually the result of a stressful situation. And pretty much all of these are going to be caused by stress, right? So stress induces a lot of mental disorders, including this one. So obviously it's similar to like regular amnesia where you forget things, but it's not caused by like an accident or brain trauma. It's caused by stress, and a lot of times you will wake up and not know who you are. So this also includes fugue state, where a sense of identity is lost. Like you have no idea who you are. So you don't just forget like some information, but you literally have no idea who you are. And so dissociative, like fugue, actually used to be a separate disorder, but now it's just a characteristic of dissociative amnesia. Depersonalization disorder is an abnormality involving the sensation that mind and body have separated. Oftentimes, sufferers explain episodes as out of the body experience. Kind of like if you think about like on TV shows, they kind of it's like them looking at themselves, right? You know, depersonalization disorder is where you have like that out of body experience. So like all of the other dissociative disorders, depersonalization disorder occurs far more frequently following a prolonged period of stress or traumatic event. So a couple key things we see with all the dissociative disorders is one is stress, is usually the cause of it, and it's some type of fragmentation of the mind. Dissociative identity disorder. So this is what used to be called personality disorder, multiple personality disorder. But now we call it DID, dissociative identity disorder, is a condition where an individual displays multiple identities or personalities. Experts say this disorder appears first in childhood and may be a defensive response to abusive situations or terrifying events. Most of the emerging personalities contrast in some significant way with the original self. So a lot of times, like maybe if you are abused, then one of your personality becomes a bully, right? So usually you develop these personalities as a defensive way to deal with some type of traumatic event that happens in your life. And then usually stress will cause these different personalities to come out. A lot of people get this confused with schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is where like see people or hear voices, types of things, like where you hallucinate and have delusions. That's different than DID. DID is like where you take on these different personalities. And so if you've ever seen the movie Split, right, there's a couple movies. I think Sibyl's one. I haven't seen that one. I hear a lot about that one. Split is a more modern one where they have multiple personalities. I think he had like 23, and they showed like 9 of them, like in the film. Herschel Walker was a very famous football player who was diagnosed with DID. And the crazy thing about it is when you're in these different personalities, you don't necessarily remember what's happening, while you take on these personalities. But your body literally takes on that personality. So if you have a personality that has diabetes and you normally don't have diabetes, your body will act like you have diabetes, which is just crazy that your body and your mind can do something just based off this, this personality that you have. So we talked about how it's the body's or it's the brain's like kind of like defense mechanism to deal with these traumatic events, but it just shows how strong the brain actually is, that it can make your body actually act like you have diabetes or whatever the situation might be. All right, and if you've seen Split, you can see all those different situations, like like when the Beast came out and how strong he would get with that. Now obviously some of that might be Hollywood, but your body literally does take on those personalities. PTSD. Now it's its own category. Post-traumatic stress disorder. It's had numerous different names throughout its history. Um, We have evidence of PTSD going back all the way to 1300 BC, where reports of battlefield stress had an adverse effect on soldiers. So this can happen to any traumatic event that happens to you. Usually we see it when soldiers, who are fighting and experience tragedy and death, but this could happen to anyone who goes through a traumatic event, a rape, a witnessing a murder, anything like that could lead to PTSD. In the past, PTSD has been referred to as railway spine, shell shock, which is a popular one you probably heard in U.S. history class with like World War I, battle fatigue, traumatic war neurosis, or post-traumatic stress syndrome. That was the last one before they named it PTSD. So today, treatment involves therapy and anti-anxiety drugs. During World War I, treatment looked much different, right? So you have shell shock from these explosions going on all around you, and they would actually give them shock therapy. So it wasn't as successful as the therapies we have today. And there's also some experimental therapies going on, actually with LSD, right? The drug, the powerful hallucinogen drug. Now, obviously, they're giving them a very small dosage of it, and it's all controlled, but they've seen a lot of positive results from this LSD treatment that they've been giving people with PTSD. So what is PTSD? All right, post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is a mental health concern that some people develop after they see or experience a traumatic event. So 7 to 8% of the U.S. population will have PTSD at some point in their lives, and you can't get over it. Reliving or re-experiencing the event. So you typically have nightmares, flashbacks, triggers, hyperarousal, or being on guard. So being jittery or overly alert, difficulty sleeping or concentrating, feeling angry or irritable. So what's it like to have PTSD may be different for everyone. There are 4 types of PTSD symptoms. Avoidance, so avoiding crowds, avoiding certain smells, sights, or sounds, avoiding talking or thinking about the event. Negative changes in beliefs and feelings, so you tend to lose interest in things you used to enjoy, feeling guilty or ashamed, or unable to trust others. And there's at the bottom it talks about there's a lot of help groups if you do feel like you have some PTSD symptoms. And the last slide. So PTSD suffering can lead to certain benefits called post-traumatic growth. So a lot of times we think about the negative that goes along with it, but there tends to be a positive side as well. Not that anyone would want to go through that traumatic experience. But they found that people who have lived through struggling experiences have an increased appreciation for life, more meaningful relationships, increased personal strength, changed priorities, and richer spiritual life. So, overall, obviously, it's more negative than positive, but we have seen, some post-traumatic growth, some positivity from it.